Hey, Bobby Owsinski here, and if you've been wondering why the music business feels like it's moving forward and backward at the same time, this month's news tells a pretty interesting story. Older songs are dominating streaming again, hip-hop may be moving past its commercial peak, and major labels seem more interested in buying catalogs than developing new artists. Then there's AI. TikTok is now filling up with AI slop. AI-generated artists are already making real money. Tidal is drawing a line on fully AI-made tracks. And companies like Suno and Udio are still caught in the middle of major lawsuits, licensing deals, and unanswered questions about who actually gets paid. We'll also look at YouTube's claim that uploaded videos can be used for AI training, Spotify's stock slide, Dean Guitar is filing for bankruptcy, Royal Labs being acquired, and a new honor for Jimi Hendrix in New York City. Stick around, I'm Bobby Owsinski, and this is my Inner Circle podcast. Welcome to Bobby Owsinski's Inner Circle. I'm Bobby Owsinski, and this is the music business news for this month. Well, don't look now, but people are listening to oldies more than new songs these days. The biggest hits on Spotify right now are basically a blast from the past. From Gen Z to boomers, listening across all generations are increasingly listening to songs that were written and recorded before 2020. In 2019 and 2020, over 90% of the songs on its global top 50 have been released in the last 2 years. That fell to around 70% in the first 4 months of 2026. Then in May, 7 of the top 10 songs on the platform were more than 2 years old. In fact, the latest Luminate report shows that 56% of 13 to 24-year-olds actually listen to songs from before 2020s. Not only that, 25% of that group listen to songs from 1990s and before. So what does this mean about the new music business? Well, how about you tell me? And speaking of old songs, recently there's been months where not a single hip-hop song has reached the Billboard top 10. This is bound to happen since all music genres reach a peak in their popularity and then they fade. While many say its golden age was in the 1980s and early 90s, hip-hop actually peaked between the late 2010s to 2020, and at that point it had about a 30% market share. Hip-hop was once a huge tool for social commentary, but as with all music, sooner or later it gets contaminated by big label money. It's just following in the footsteps of rock and R&B and soul and grunge and just about every other music trend that you can think of. So speaking of record labels, they've lost their ability to launch new careers. They don't want talent anymore, they want metrics. They really prefer not to deal with artists in general because career development is such a hassle. So they demand that musicians build their own audience via TikTok and other social media platforms. The problem is that as soon as an artist does this, they don't need a record label anymore. So the trend for major labels is to spend all their money on old songs by buying catalogs, and Wall Street loves this. It's a dependable source of income as compared to the up and down business of developing talent. Also, it's why labels are making deals with AI music generator platforms. Get rid of the artists, get rid of the problems. Something that's just gone under the radar that's a direct result of this is that TikTok laid off employees who interface with record labels. Hey, quick pause. Have you ever felt like your mixes are close, but just not quite to the level that you hear from the pros? The truth is, even with today's powerful home studios, it's the techniques that make all the difference. The Mixing Engineer's Handbook, now in its 6th edition, walks you through these techniques step by step, from EQ and compression to immersive audio and the latest plugins. You'll also hear directly from some of the world's top mixers through exclusive interviews and bonus content. If you want your mixes to sound polished and professional no matter what setup you're working on, scan the QR code on screen or click the link in the show notes. Now, back to the conversation. Now, it's building its own music distribution service so it can now launch its own artists on streaming platforms. And it's also developing in-house resources for licensing music for advertising and film placement. If the record labels no longer want the job of developing talent, then somebody has to do it, and that someone just might be TikTok. Across the most popular 20 categories, including science, beauty, history, advice, food, business, books, travel, fitness, gaming, and music. Here's what the report found. 59% of videos viewed in a new TikTok account's For You page are all AI slop, which is about 3 times as much as a new YouTube user encounters. Almost 58% of all TikTok videos that are aimed at children are AI slop. Science and education, health and history are all very high in AI-generated content. In fact, 74% of videos using the hashtag health tips are slop. Now, it turns out that there are some categories where it's mostly human videos. Fitness, music, fashion, almost entirely human-made. It's not just video, though. It's the scripts and the summaries and the descriptions. They're also AI-generated, and many were found to contain a lot of mistakes. First of all, whether a video is AI-generated or human-made, it's usually accompanied by music, and that's the good part for an artist. The bad part is that people, especially young people, are becoming more and more negative about AI in general as the weeks go by, and they're able to spot it immediately. That means an AI-generated video is not likely to go viral. What's more, kids are being trained early about AI slop, which means at some point early in their lives, they grow tired of it and search for human-made content. So remember how royalties work on TikTok. You don't get paid for views, you get paid for the number of videos that contain your music. That's why if a video has 1 million views, the artist will just make about 3 cents. But if the same song was used in 1 million videos, the royalty payout will be about $30,000. Big difference. The bottom line is that so many social networks are becoming reservoirs of AI slop, and there's a genuine dislike for it by the general public. You should avoid it at all costs. Which leads us to AI-generated artists. The top 10 most streamed AI tracks have generated over $5 billion in total revenue from both Spotify and YouTube over the last year. Across a dataset of 70 AI artists, the total revenue is about $10 million, with Spotify at about $7 million and YouTube around $3 million. The majority of these top-performing AI tracks were released in 2025, though, with several having tens or even hundreds of millions of streams. AI music isn't limited to one genre, but soul blues and styles that are sort of like that, like R&B and country blues, appear more frequently among mid to high earning artists. That means that these genres may be particularly well suited to current AI production and audience demand. The good news here is that most of these tracks were released last year. Consumers and AI uploaders seem to be a lot more cautious about their AI consumption this year. And speaking of AI royalties, Tidal announced that it will no longer pay royalties on any song that it finds to be 100% AI generated. What's more, the song will no longer be available for direct-to-fan sales either. The platform will accept AI-generated songs, but will tag them with a badge so listeners can easily identify them. Tidal is incorporating some new technology to identify AI music, but it also expects distributors to identify it before it even gets uploaded to the platform. So Suno just raised about $400 million, which makes the company worth $5.4 billion. But the question really is, why does this platform need the money? So according to CEO and co-founder Mickey Schulman, he said, "This funding will help us accelerate what matters most, helping people express themselves through music while continuing to expand what's possible for artists and creators on Suno. Having more capital allows us to operate the business differently and take some bigger swings." That's a lot of words that really doesn't mean much. The real reason is that Suno remains locked in legal battles with both Universal Music Group and Sony Music Entertainment, as well as Denmark's Coda and Germany's Gemma, over training the platform on their music. UMG and Sony actually asked the federal court last month for permission to add more than 61,000 copyrighted sound recordings to their lawsuit against Suno. Suno then came back to ask the court to use a number of audio files it used to train a big secret. It says that disclosing the figure would give rivals a competitive advantage. Maybe, maybe not. So the reason why it raised $400 million? To pay legal fees or settlements if it loses the legal battle. And speaking of lawsuits, the National Music Publishers Association announced that it inked a licensing agreement with AI music generation platform Udio. The deal comes months after Udio had settled lawsuits at UMG and WMG last fall. Sony Music Group is still in litigation, though. I'm baffled with these deals. First of all, it's never mentioned exactly what the terms are and how it benefits artists or songwriters. There's money changing hands, but never a word on how much actually makes it to the people that create music in the first place. If I were an artist, I'd run away from any label or publisher who is part of such a deal. It's a complete sellout. So here's an association that actually sees it that way as well. The Musicians Union has sued both Warner's and Universal over its AI deals. The AFM stated that with the settlements that happened, UMG and WMG received a lot of compensation for the AI companies for these past copyright violations for using their music as training. But they failed to share the settlement money and the future revenue with those same artists whose music was copied, used for training, and incorporated in the development of AI models and platforms. It's too early to see how this plays out, but good for the union for stepping up. And this is scary. YouTube is now claiming that if you upload a video onto its service, you automatically give it permission for AI training of Google's Lyria 3 model. It seems that no one knew this, and maybe even YouTube didn't either, until it became a convenient argument against the lawsuit that was filed by a bunch of indie artists. The gist of the suit is that Google had the ability to do the right thing by easily informing the artists and the labels. But instead, they chose to cheap out and train under the table. Google wants the lawsuit thrown out, but not because of the usual "it's fair use" argument where they state the music is used for educational purposes. They're saying that if you agreed to YouTube's terms of service, which you need to do in order to post a video, then you agreed to let them use your content for AI training. In Google's opinion, it doesn't need your permission to steal your content to train its AI. If you ever uploaded a video, you agreed to the terms of service. The saving grace is that Lyria 3 isn't all that popular. In fact, most people don't even know about it. Plus, it still has a lot of limitations, like a limit of 3 minutes on all the songs. But using this strategy certainly creates a bad precedent that I'm sure you'll see followed by other tech companies. Starstruck is its forthcoming consumer app that lets fans remix, cover, and reimagine songs by their favorite artist. And the royalties flow back to the rights holders every time a fan creates something. It's set to launch later this year as a mobile-first app, and it's aimed at everyday fans rather than professional artists and producers. The app is going to offer 4 models for fans to interact with music that artists already opted in. Cover generates a new artist version of an existing song using the original lyrics and composition. Reimagine keeps the lyrics, but rewrites the musical composition entirely, as if a different artist had rewritten the song. Remix applies a genre or style shift to the existing recording. Create lets users write their own lyrics and pair them with the selected artist's voice, and that's also a subject of guardrails around the topic and language and style. Whichever mode users ultimately pick, they always have to select a specific artist and a specific song. Artists and songwriters opt in via their respective label and publisher partnerships, and royalties supposedly will flow back to the artists and songwriters and rights holders every time a user uses it. Now, who owns the recordings? Well, guess what? It's owned by the rights holder of the participating artist. And that could be the artist label or the publisher, maybe even the artists themselves. First of all, do consumers really want to do this? It's been tried before, and most listeners thought it was too much trouble. People don't like to remix stuff, they just like to listen to it. Second of all, Udio just isn't that big a deal these days. The top trending tracks on Udio get only about 100 plays a month. Meanwhile, top tracks on Suno regularly clear about 200,000 streams a month or more. And finally, Spotify has been teasing a similar AI remixing feature for its rumored super premium tier, with many of the same licensing partners that Udio has. I predict this feature will be dead on arrival. People just won't care. And speaking of Spotify, its stock is down 40% over the last year. This is probably due to several factors like subscription fatigue, the music distribution market is saturated, the company hasn't offered anything new, it has a pretty tired interface. Then there's the 3 price increases over the last 3 years. And then we have Spotify corporate execs that have been cashing out their stock over the last 2 years. That's usually a good sign to bail on the platform. So, getting back to the audio and MI business, Armadillo Enterprises, which is the parent company of Dean Guitars, has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The filings come after several years of legal trouble for Dean and Armadillo, most notably because of a trademark lawsuit brought by Gibson regarding the guitar shapes. Armadillo was found to have sold infringing guitar designs and was ordered to stop marketing and selling its V and Z style instruments. The company then lost its appeal. So, following the legal loss to Gibson, the jury found that Dean must pay Gibson just $1 in damages, but also around $170,000 in legal fees. That was enough to push Dean over the edge. Let's see what happens. Have we seen before brands come back nicely from bankruptcy under the right circumstances? And here's the perfect example of that. Höfner Guitars declared bankruptcy about 6 months ago, but was just bought by Giwa Music. The company already has Ovation and Gretsch drums. The interesting thing is that Höfner always was cheap and light and best known for the Beatle bass, and it had a sound. They're going to be made in China now. And Royal Labs, the ribbon microphone company, recently was acquired by Sound Great Holdings. They also own Undertone Audio. If you listen to me, you probably know that I'm always weary of great brands being acquired, but this seems to be a good move. Sounds Great has proven industry execs in much deeper pockets than Royer's previous ownership, so I think ultimately this is going to be good for the brand. And finally, 8th Street West in New York City's Greenwich Village has been co-named Jimi Hendrix Way. Jimmy's Electric Lady studio is nearby. I can't think of a better way to honor one of our greatest guitar heroes. So that's the news. Thanks for stopping by, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening and being in my inner circle. Remember, if you have any questions or comments, you can send them to questions@bobbyowsinski.com. You can also learn all about the latest in music, audio, and production news, and find out about openings for my latest online classes at bobbyowsinski.com. This is Bobby Owsinski. I will see you next time.